Have you been wondering how we can have better conversations across the races and the sexes? On this episode of the PA System, I'm talking with Sheena Yap Chan about how we can do that, and in particular, how we can help each other along the way. So thank you so much for being here with me, Sheena.
Thanks for having me, Pamela. I'm so excited to be here today just to chat with you. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Such a joy to have you. So this is a really important topic. And I feel like, it's kind of timely in the sense that, we've just celebrated International Women's Day. And there's so many topics that we could touch on. But I want to kind of give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and tell us a little bit about you first. So tell us, where did you grow up?
For sure. So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Sheena Yap Chan. I was born in the Philippines and moved to Toronto, Canada when I was 7. And growing up as an Asian kid in Canada, all I ever saw was white people on TV, on billboards and magazines. And because of that, I was really ashamed of being Asian. I didn't think I was beautiful because I didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And I didn't look white. And so I always wanted to change my name to Heather to sound more Caucasian. And it wasn't until in my adulthood where I really embraced being Asian. And that's when I decided to dye my hair back from blonde to my original hair color. And so I'm always trying to find different ways to elevate the voices of Asian women, have more representation, because we're still so underrepresented. And so in 2015, I decided to create this podcast called the Tao of Self Confidence, where I interview Asian women about their journey to self-confidence. And that is really huge because back then when I had my own confidence issues, I never could find any support system that was catered for Asian women. And so I always felt like I was the only one going through what I was going through. But as I was interviewing all these amazing women, they were going through similar things, and it made me realize I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the only one who was thinking like this, right? And so that was the one reason why I started my podcast. The next one was because representation and having a stronger representation of Asian women. Society still sees us as quiet and submissive and obedient, or they treat us as sex objects, and because of that, we don't end up in leadership roles. We're not being taken seriously. We don't get equal pay. We don't get to be promoted in high position roles in companies, or not even be CEOs because of this model minority myth. And so I really wanted to create, multifaceted Asian women, so women who have different careers, who have been able to, be at their lowest of their low and still can overcome it. And this is huge because we get empowered through stories. And when you can see someone who's kind of like you, who kind of looks like you, who's been through similar situations and has been able to overcome it, then you start to realize what's possible for yourself, and you're going to start looking for ways to take action in your own destiny. And so I'm always trying to find different ways to elevate Asian women's voices, not just through podcasting, but different platforms. And one of the things we did do is this book called Asian Women Who Boss Up. And this book I really love is because you don't really see a lot of books that highlight 16 Asian women on a cover of a book, right? Like just seeing that is like when I watched Crazy Rich Asians for the first time. I just felt so proud that I finally have a platform or something to be proud of, something that I could showcase to other Asian women, right? And even the feedback that I've gotten has been amazing. I've had moms who tell me that this is a kind of mentality they want to instill in their daughters. These are the books that they want to read with their daughters. Even I got husbands telling me that, they want to thank me on behalf of their wife, their sister, their daughters, because that's definitely needed, and it's not around. Like you don't really see these in bookstores or on Amazon. Well, now you see it on Amazon because it's out there. Before you don't really see it. Yeah, thank you. And even if you do see it, nobody talks about it, right? Because of how we're brought up, right?
I think that's such a great point. And I want to come back to that, but I want to back up just a little bit before you go too much further, because I am guessing there's some things that happened to you as you were growing up in your childhood and young adulthood that shaped you to go on to do the things you've done. So tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
Yeah, back then, I used to think I was always a failure. And I didn't know why. And I realized a couple years back, or about 5 years back, it was because in the Philippines, actually, the teacher failed me from kindergarten for coloring outside the lines of a photo.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. This is true. Like I was just stuck on this one photo trying to color it. Yeah, and the teacher would give me another new photo, like another new paper of the same photo, trying to color it, and I always just colored it outside the lines. And because of that, I failed kindergarten. I had to move to another school and redo kindergarten all over again.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine like
the that was going to change your life.
The trauma you face as a 5-year-old that most 5-year-olds don't really go through. And I think as women, we tend to forget all the traumas that we go through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's like hurts us too. And that's why we sometimes feel the way we feel, because of the traumas that we've gone through that we aren't even aware about. But when we can discover them, it really does have that aha moment, right? And so growing up as well, like not having enough representation, even moving to Canada to take ESL classes, because I couldn't put two sentences together, right? I would say something, but people would always tell me like, whatever you're saying doesn't make sense. And so I had to take English classes.
So you just picked up on your own and moved to Canada.
When I moved to Canada, I could speak a little bit of English, but it wasn't enough to like make a sentence that would make sense for other people.
Sure.
And so when I started school in Canada, I had to take English as a second language like classes so that I could speak better. And so even in my teenage years, like I just had a lot of insecurities. I always felt I was never good enough. I wasn't beautiful enough. I always compared myself to others. I could never make a decision for myself or even follow my intuition. And like fear would always like stop me from taking action. Like I would resist a lot because I was always scared of what would happen, right? Or if it would fail.
Fear of failure, yes.
Yeah. And even rejection, like taking rejection was not like my thing. Like I would hate it. Like I would cry or probably be desperate, depressed over like someone saying no to something. So I went through a lot of stuff before even like creating this podcast, right? Just all these things. And like I just held it in because we were never told to like share our feelings or share what we feel, right?
I was going to say, and was this kind of the culture of your family as well?
Yeah, like just our upbringing. We don't really talk about our feelings. Like we don't even say I love you to each other. So like when I used to see that on TV, I was like, we don't do that.
Yeah, right.
That's a Chinese thing.
You're like, that only happens on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so then once you kind of made that progress and you were able to kind of start moving into your own a little bit and owning a little bit more of your power, how did that feel for you? I mean, what was that experience like?
It felt kind of weird. And like at times I still kind of doubted myself because I didn't know if this was where I was supposed to go. I know sometimes when we have something planned out, it doesn't always look like how we picture it in our head. But then when you look back, right? When you look back, you're like, everything makes sense. Like you're like, I finally get why all that happened, right? And so that's how I felt. Like I just felt at first like this is weird. Like this isn't really me. This like something's not right. But at the same time, you're like, you're just gonna go for it because you don't know what's on the other side, right? Learning to just embrace the unknown. Society makes us scared of the unknown, and that's why sometimes we're all stuck at jobs or we're stuck at the position that we're in because we're so afraid to just embark on the unknown.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I want to pause just for a moment because there's a question that I want to be able to share with the audience, and I'd like for us to talk a little bit about this as well. But it's just, what do you think would help shift the conversation to improve relationships across races and sexes? So going back to where we were just a little bit ago before I kind of made you back up, I'd love for you to kind of talk about, this book and what has come from that. What kind of conversations are starting to take place, and how are you seeing things shift because of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just, bringing this book up, talking to people about it, and being able to just learn to be vulnerable and be more honest about everything. It's really helped women learn to be okay with where they're at, especially when it comes to mental health, because mental health is still such a taboo in Asian culture that it's not talked about. Right? Sometimes they think it's not real, or they avoid it, or they don't bring it up, or they do like the total opposite and like put you in a mental institution because they just don't want to deal with it. Right. And so just having books like this, being able to share stories of like, being able to overcome obstacles to forge our own path, because it's not easy, right? Like it's not easy being an entrepreneur. It's right. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it's a lot, right?
That's so true. Very difficult, very challenging
to embrace that suck, right? And so part of bossing up starts with us. And then as you start building your confidence and realize your own potential and your capabilities, then we start bossing up in other ways. Like for me, bossing up for our Asian community, especially with what's been going on in America and Canada and Europe, and I think even Australia with the recent increase of Asian hate crimes, right? Every single day, all I see is either an elderly getting beaten up or a woman being assaulted. And this breaks my heart, especially when it comes to elderly, because I still have two grandmas who live in the Philippines, and that could be someone's grandmother or grandfather being targeted. And not all of them are being reported to the police because of how we're brought up, We're always told never to make any noise, never talk about
Yeah.
anything, just be silent, just let it go. Or there's also a language barrier, right? They can't, how are they
Mm,
going to tell the police what's happened to them when they can't speak in English?
sure.
And even yesterday, I was reading how a woman got spat on, her and her baby got spat on 3 times and got called the Chinese virus, right?
Wow.
And she actually wasn't going to report it because she was just going to let it go like we usually do. But if it wasn't for her husband, we wouldn't be hearing about this. But her husband was adamant on telling the police that this is a hate crime. She was
Right.
being spat on and being called the Chinese virus, right? And so it's really important to bring these topics up so that people are aware. And this type of racism has been going on, since history. It's just nobody talks
Right.
about it. It was
Yes.
never,
Well,
there was this was never in the history books. Nobody
this is
talks about, like,
nothing new.
yeah, like nobody talks about the Chinese Exclusion Act that happened like in the beginning of time, or like when Chinese people started coming to Canada and in America. Nobody talks about this in school, so people don't think we go through racism, but we do, right? Especially in Canada, we go through so much polite racism. I know
Interesting.
yeah, Canadians are considered polite, and so like even like polite racism is still inappropriate, right? But people don't
Yes.
understand that, right? Like,
Right.
I read articles where a woman will just go up to 2 random Chinese guys and just politely ask, "Are you the ones who have the virus?" Like that's still
Wow.
inappropriate.
Yeah. Wow. That's just mind boggling to me. But, I think about even back in the 40s when the Japanese were really being, assaulted. I mean, regularly, or put in camps, or having their homes taken away from them, or all of this kind of extreme racism. And to me, it's like, okay, have we not yet progressed, in the last 70 years, far enough for us to understand that there's so many ways that we could go about making the conversation one that engages everyone and allows us to evolve as a species. I mean, it's hard for me to comprehend, why it's taking us this long, to be honest. But I think what you're doing is so important, because I really do believe that once we start to have conversations, then we can understand, what, this person is no different than me. They have the same sorts of feelings and experiences that I do as a human being. And so, therefore, I should treat them the way I would want to be treated. I mean, it's not complicated, right? And so, I love, though, that you're bringing attention to this, because, I think obviously we can easily understand that women, throughout history have also been oppressed, right? I mean, that's common knowledge, no big mystery there. But I don't think that there's been a lot of attention given to this topic in our culture, certainly, for Asians. And I think, for a lot of us who are kind of coming to the realization of how prevalent some of this still is. I mean, before we even came on the air, you were telling me some of these things that have been happening, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, how is this stuff still going on all the time? And we don't even really know about it most of the time. And so I appreciate the fact that you're bringing this forward. And also because, mental health, like you said, is such a big issue right now anyway. And
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to realize, what, regardless of what the circumstances are and why something is happening, it's important to know that there's resources, that there's help, and that you have to speak up, that it's paramount.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it has to start with us, right? Like,
Yes.
I know not everybody is ready to speak up because maybe they're not ready for that responsibility or burden, or it could be dangerous for them, right? And it took me a while to realize that because, sometimes you get frustrated. It's like, why aren't we speaking up? This is our own people. Like, they're getting hurt every single day. And I realized, like, not everyone's ready. And even for some Asian people who grew up all their lives in America and Canada, they can't connect themselves to Asian culture because that's not how they were brought up. And so this is why it's so important to create books like Asian Women Who Boss Up, who can share stories and realize like they're not that different than they realize. Yeah, you may have been brought up in America, but we still have very like strong cultures or strong traditions that we celebrate in our own culture, right? So it's really important for them to have these resources, so when they are ready to find out more about it or even go looking for it, it's there for them. right?
No, that's great. And so to that point, then for people who, may not feel like they can speak up yet, but they need to be able to get into a safe space or tell someone, so they can get out of a bad situation. How do they go about doing that? And what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are nonprofit organizations out there that are, fighting this anti-Asian racism. So, like, part of the proceeds for anyone who pre-orders the book, I'm going to donate it to those nonprofit organizations because they are working hard to, trace crimes, help people out, give them resources, and also just being able to have a safe space where people can talk, right? If I didn't like create safe spaces and like Clubhouse, I wouldn't know half the things that's going on. And so being able to just give them that safe space makes a huge difference, right? Because a lot of people are still really scared to talk, right? Or just say anything because it's not typical. It's not normal for them to be like, I can actually speak my voice and no one will judge me.
Right.
So in order to start, we have to create that safe space that it's okay to talk about these things. And I think just learning to lead by example and just consistently showing up, people will start to see what you're doing and they want to be a part of it. And so I think that's how you can inspire people, just especially as a leader, right? Being a leader is just leading by example, just showing up, just being there, taking action. Because I always believe actions speak louder than words. And the more you talk about it, the more you bring it up, the more you're just in their face sometimes, like they'll get it. So And I know as women, it's really hard for us to go out there and put ourselves out there, especially when it comes to self-promotion. I talk to so many women who have this uncomfortable feeling of promoting themselves out to the world. And I always tell them, like, if you have a product or service that's going to help someone, you're actually doing a disservice by not promoting yourself. So
love that. I think that's such a great point because I do think that shame and fear is something that comes up for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And that's really what we're talking about. And in this case is, you don't want to go out there and just air your dirty laundry per se, because you still have a sense of shame around it, even if you shouldn't, even if it's unjustified. And so I think to that point, it's really important for people to understand, it's perfectly normal to feel that way, to have those feelings, but you don't have to stay in that space, Find someone you trust that you can share something with. If it's a friend, if it's someone in your family, you don't have to go into Clubhouse, you don't have to go into Facebook, but find someone who you can talk to and find ways to start moving out of whatever situation it is that you're in that maybe either one, just unhealthy, or two, possibly even dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like there's so many resources out now, especially with the pandemic, right? Everyone knows all our mental health issues have heightened. And I know there's still like the stigma of like asking for professional help or seeking professional help because I think if they do that, like something's wrong with them. But the more we can say, it's just part of taking care of our mental well-being, and everyone is different. Some people may need to seek professional help, some don't. Some may just need to talk to a friend or have someone they can lean on or hire a coach or do a Clubhouse or listen to a podcast. Everyone is totally different, and you have to do what works for you, right? Because we're all different.
Absolutely.
What may work for me may not work for you, and vice versa. So it's really important to create that path for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point too, because sometimes we feel like, okay, well, so-and-so did this, so that's what I'm supposed to do, or so-and-so did that, and even just allowing ourselves that space to sit with ourselves. I mean, that's something that I know for me has been pivotal in my life, is allowing myself to have my own conversation around, okay, what do I want to do in this situation? Do I want to bring somebody in? Is this something that maybe I just need to deal with internally and I can bring myself out of this situation, or do I need help? And to, like you were saying earlier, kind of face something head on, because I think you're absolutely right. A lot of times with our trauma, we don't do that. And we dismiss it.
Yeah, for sure. And we think that it doesn't affect us, but it really does. And it's because it's been hidden in so many layers that we forget about it, and it's still like clinging on to us. But the moment we can, make aware of it and start trying to find ways to overcome it, then we can start getting better and be the person that we're meant to be. And so I know as women, it's a lot harder for us, right? Because, we're women, we're more emotional, we're more over analytical. We still like over prepare and still kind of hold back a bit because of how we see ourselves. And it starts as young as like 5-6 years old. Like there's reports saying like when kids, 7 out of 10 girls already feel like they're not beautiful, or they're less smarter than boys. So we really have to learn to start young, show them, like, give them a compliment, and teach them to learn how to accept a compliment, right? Because most of the time when someone gives you a compliment, you're like, you dismiss it, right? You're like, no, I don't think you're talking about me. Are you sure?
Right.
And so
it's kind of like, oh, what, this old thing, this dress, mentality.
Yeah. And so we just have to learn to do those little things, like accepting a compliment, just saying thank you, right? So we can show like our future generation, it's okay when someone calls you pretty. It's okay if someone says you have a nice dress.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, for girls who are, obviously not watching this show, but who are younger, who are in middle school and high school, it's such a difficult time anyway, right? I mean, you're so self-conscious, painfully, right?
Yeah.
And then you throw these other elements on top, and it's like, how do you ever find your way through that maze, Yeah. And just, I think as parents and certainly as moms, to encourage our girls to be more vocal, to be, more forthcoming with what's going on in their lives, having those conversations around, what happens at school or what kind of interactions they're having, I think is so important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, creating that safe space is really important, especially like, when I was a teenager, we never really had social media, right? So we didn't really have to deal with that. And like social media can also be detrimental to your mental health, right? Especially when you go on Instagram and you see that perfect curated photo that's been like altered to a T. And
exactly.
Beauty looks like, but really they didn't see what the raw picture looked like. And so, it's really important to show people that what you see on social media isn't always real. And because of that, people have like body dysmorphia. And I think there was even like social media dysmorphia, or there was some term that's something to do with social media as well, because social media has been really like affecting people's mental health because of what they see.
Yeah, well, and along those lines, I think that's, it's also contributing to eating disorders. And we're seeing that in girls younger and younger as well. So I think that's, really important as well. Well, so tell me a little bit about this this book and kind of some of the stories. I mean, tell me a little bit about what's coming out of this movement and what you're seeing happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we just really want to find a platform where women, especially Asian women, can be celebrated, right? I get a lot of, feedback, and some of them are like, finally, we've been bossing up for so many years and nobody talks about us. So like, and I always say, if you want representation, it really has to start with yourself. I started with not knowing what to do. I didn't even know what a podcast was when I started my podcast. This title was not supposed to be the Tao of Self Confidence. Okay? I'll share this story because I think it's really important to show that I make mistakes all the time, but we can always correct it. So when I first started this podcast, I really wanted to name it The Stripper and have the tagline, to strip your limiting beliefs away. And so I hired someone to do the graphic. It was literally a silhouette of a stripper with a whip. And thank God I was in this like podcasting mastermind so that I know if I was doing something wrong or right. And I shared that graphic with everyone. And of course, the feedback was not what I expected, because I thought, here I am, I'm such a genius. And they're like, you're going to draw the wrong crowd. This isn't the type of message you really want to relay on your podcast. Like, are you sure about this? And I was like, if I can't get this name right, how am I going to get the show right? So I had to like step back and get clear. And that's when this name came out, the Tao of Self Confidence. And once I sent this graphic, everyone loved it. So I was like, okay, I'm good. But it's just a huge lesson. Like when you're doing something, it's better to be clear than clever. And it makes a huge difference when you're clear about what you want to do and the type of things you want to do.
Love that. Love that. And so how many women are represented in this book?
There's 18 in total, but there's 16 on the cover. And so, there's women from US, Canada, also in Europe. And some of them have been through like some of the craziest things in their life, has been able to overcome it. Some have gone through cancer, bankruptcy, sued by the FTC. And like, that's stuff that can really bring you down and never give you the will to get back up again, right? Even addiction, like drug addiction, right? Or alcoholism, things like that. Like these are things that most people deal with and have no clue how to pick themselves back up. And that's why it's so important to share stories like this so they can realize like she went through what I went through. And if she can do it, so can I. And it's really important to share our stories, right? A lot of us feel like, well, my story isn't that great. Well, so according to who, right? What if your story can change one person's life? And what if that one person, it could be like the next Oprah or the next Tony Robbins? Like that's still
you
like
never know.
You're making a huge impact. You just don't know it. So it's really important to share our stories.
I love that. Well, and I just, in talking about this, it reminds me that the more of us that do this, the more of us that write these books, that step into our courage, that step into our calling or purpose, whatever you want to label it, and have our voices heard, then the more we get to have these conversations and the more we get to change as a collective, the more we get to evolve and become something better. And I think that really, to me, is something magical. Like we all have this power to put our little piece of contribution in there and make that happen. And so I just appreciate you for being here and for doing your part, for stepping into your courage and leading the way on this. Chloe has a comment. She says, great conversation, ladies. Thanks so much for sharing your message, Sheena Yap Chan. And sharing of stories and overcoming those odds can shift many perspectives. Yes.
Thank you, Chloe. Appreciate it.
Yes. And thank you for being on with us, Chloe. We appreciate you. And Scott Rickards just said hi.
Hi.
So thank you, Scott, for being on as well. And while we've had an amazing conversation and I would love to keep chatting with you, I know we're getting a little close on our time. So I want to give people a chance to just find out how to get in touch with you and the best way to find your book and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So you can check out my website, sheenayapchan.com. You can pre-order a copy of the book. And as I mentioned, part of the proceeds will go to organizations that are fighting anti-Asian racism. And also you can, I also have a free gift where you could get a free report that's called 8 Ways to Boss Up Your Confidence. You can also check my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or on my website as well, the Tao of Self Confidence.com. And honestly, the easiest way to find me is to Google my name, Sheena Yap Chan, because I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan on the internet. So it makes things a lot easier.
Good to know. Good to know. And your handles on Instagram or Clubhouse?
So on Clubhouse, it's just at Sheena Yap Chan. On Instagram, it's at sheena.yap.chan.
Okay, perfect. Well, I know, people use different platforms. I tend to be on Facebook more than anything else, although Clubhouse has given it a run for its money lately.
I know,
but
same here.
People, the opportunity to go different places. And your book is on Amazon, correct?
Yeah, so the ebook is on Amazon, but if you want a signed copy, you would have to order it directly from my website. We also have a virtual summit featuring all the authors on the book that's happening at the end of the month. That's free to register, and you can also check that out on my website. You can get to reserve your free spot.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I always tell women is that, you're so capable, like you're more capable than you realize. It's because of how we perceive ourselves that stops us from even taking that first step to our greatness. And so it's really important to work on your mindset and work on, being able to be that powerhouse that you're meant to be. Because once we can help change our mindset to see our true worth, we become unstoppable and we become invincible. Because I believe it might ruffle some feathers. Women can change the world, like literally. Like
absolutely agree.
The countries that has handled the pandemic, like they've handled it so well. And so there's even an article how they're saying to have a great post-COVID world is to have more women leaders. And in order for us to have more women leaders is to help women rise up, help them see their potential, believe in themselves, and help them, give that little push to their greatness. So
love that.
Yeah, I hope this helps all the women out there listening today.
Well, thank you so much. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, so many more women's voices need to be heard. And this is the time, right? I mean, it's now that we can really start having these conversations and coming together. And I think that a lot of women really want to see that happen. We really want to see shift and change in the world. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And I'm excited to see how things move forward for you and really for this movement, because I really believe that that's what it is. And that's what it's going to evolve into and beyond really as time goes on. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me. I really had a great time chatting today.
Yeah, so it was wonderful. And thank you all out there in the audience for being here as well. Appreciate you. And thank you for sharing out and just for being here and sharing your time with us. So we will see you again next week. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.